Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Morning, John.
How you doing?
I'm wondering how you're doing. I left the bar before you did last.
I was right behind you.
It was great. First of all, thank you very much for being here. We, as you heard a little bit this morning, we are a group of individuals that are highly committed and fairly passionate about books, and not only the books, but the manufactured book. And you taking the time to come down here and be with us is just very much appreciated. So again, thank you very much.
No, thank you so much. I was excited when you extended the invitation, and just spending a few hours last night with folks around the bar and having some food was great. I mean, we love books. It's great to meet some folks that I haven't met before. So I'm really excited to be here.
That's great. Well, why don't we start with that? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? You've obviously a young man, but you've risen the ranks and now lead one of the largest publishers in the world. So why don't you tell us a little about you and how you ended up where you are?
Looks are deceiving, Dave. I'm way older than you think. I'm not even the youngest CEO. It kills me. I mean, I used to be the young whippersnapper, and now I'm not. But anyway, it's been a great run at Macmillan. I've been with Macmillan for about 14 years, but I'm going to go back to the beginning. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. I grew up in the suburbs in New Jersey. I went to George Washington University for college, and I start the story that way because it's sort of seminal for what happens next. I promoted concerts while I was on campus. I worked for a local concert promoter when I graduated college. I wanted to be in the music business. My grandfather was a professional jazz musician, so music was sort of in my blood. And so I wound up working for this club. If anyone knows in Washington, D.C., I worked at the 930 Club. It's still there. It's in a different location. So I was one of the managers of the 930 Club, doing shows at the club, but also in venues throughout the city. If you know D.C., the Calorama rink, the roller skating rink, we had a lot of shows up there. So I was going to be in the music business. I said, okay, who's the movers and shakers in the music business? And it was the lawyers. And I said, I'm going to go back and I'm going to be a lawyer. And I actually went to law school. I did a quick detour. I was a finance major undergrad, and the only job I ever got because I knew someone was the eldest brother, one of my childhood friends. He goes, come on, none of this music nonsense. You're a finance major. Come work for me. And I worked doing interest rate derivative trading support for 1 year.
That sounds like fun.
I'm not a banker. Yeah. So I did go to law school. I worked as a lawyer for about 5 years doing film, television, music, visual arts licensing, and a lot of publishing. And that's where my interest in publishing took over. I went to a second firm. I spent most of my day, 80% of my day, working for Barnes & Noble, barnesandnoble.com as their outside lawyer. I think at the time they had just hired one in-house law firm, a lawyer. So the firm did everything for them. And I did that for a little bit, and I realized that. So my career shifted from my interest in music mostly because the record industry was imploding.
Right.
And while I liked all the other stuff, I liked film, I liked television, I found myself really enjoying the book side of things. I liked the people, I liked the content. It was a New York business, so I started shifting my career towards that. And then while I was working at that second firm, I realized I want to run a company. And that's where I wanted to put my career path on to that track. And I wound up getting a call from Disney. Disney got my name from a partner at the first firm, said, we're looking for a guy who can explain sort of content and creative to finance people and finance to creative people, and knows how to do complex licensing deals. They gave him my name. I went into Disney Publishing, started in the business development group, worked my way up, eventually became North American publisher, where I oversaw what they called their vertical publishing operations, which we call publishing. And I did that for a few years, and I left and I went to an early stage social media marketing company. And that was a hot mess. I was there for 10 months. And thankfully, John Sargent gave me a call and said, hey, you want to come run our children's division? And I did. And that was, nearly 15 years ago when I had that meeting with them. I started with Macmillan in January of 11, ran the kids group for 10 years, became the president overseeing all the publishers in January 21. And I've been running the day-to-day as CEO since September of 22. So that's the path.
That's great.
Very, very typical for book publishing.
Yeah, exactly. It's, an eclectic grouping, obviously, from your music background to the law, to some finance. And do you think those different roles, including, what you did at Disney, shaped who you are as a CEO? How have you used those experience to sort of create the individual that you are running Macmillan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I joke that it's not a typical path, and it's not, but it's more linear than I think people would see, because when I was working at that law firm, the first one in particular, we represented a lot of chefs. And back then, a TV chef, there was no food TV, there was no Food Network. You went on PBS, public television, to sell your cookbook. So we did the cookbook deal, and then the best ones got a TV deal, and the really best ones got merchandising deals. So we were building brands, we were building holistic approaches to how you look at a business. So that sort of thread ran definitely into Disney, which is all about brand, all about building franchises. And then as a children's publisher, YA publishing really is about that community. And now it's everywhere we go. We talk about romantasy, which I know we'll hit on later. It's all about community building. It's about finding that audience. The way I say it is you got to find the evangelist and empower them to spread the gospel. And that's how we do, there's only one way to sell books. It's word of mouth. It's just that word of mouth looks different today than it did 10, 20, 30 years ago. So that experience throughout my career has definitely helped me from the marketing and positioning point of view, but also meeting different people and doing different things. Having a perspective that's outside of book publishing is incredibly important. And when you look at the team that we put together at Macmillan now, the head of people and culture comes from professional sports. Our head of comms comes from tech. She also worked in music at one point before tech. Our COO came from Barnes & Noble, has experience in Target before that, not just book publishing in hardline. So we have a lot of people with a lot of different experiences in the company. And of course, the book people are the book people too. We have a lot of people that are just, lifelong book publishing people. So that mix, I think, makes us very strong.
Well, it's interesting. You said that it makes you strong, but part of that is you're building a brand at Macmillan, right? You're bringing those people in. You're using your vast experience. We'll get into some more, maybe pertinent to this group, but tell me about your brand and Macmillan. I mean, obviously one of the big five publishers. You got Hachette and Simon & Schuster and HarperCollins, Penguin Random House. We've had the advantage of hearing from some of those folks in these meetings in the past. But what's the brand of Macmillan? Who's Macmillan, and how do you see them as different from the other major trade publishers?
Yeah, I think we are different. We're always the smallest. Hopefully we won't always be the smallest. We're working real hard not to be, but we're a 5% market share company. We were a 4% market share company not too long ago. So that's a big jump. That's a big gain in share. And we're doing it from all different parts of our business. We have 8 different publishing divisions with, I can't even count how many imprints we have now, but 8 different publishing divisions, including our audio division. And they all have really different personalities. So whenever you go to an author meeting, you always want to say, we're like a boutique publishing company. We're going to give you the personal care. And everyone says it, and some do it better than others. I think we're quite good at it. And each of those publishing divisions sort of they have their own personality, and they run like their own creative engine. They have their own marketing teams. They have their own art and design teams. And they obviously have their own editorial teams. And that gives them a personality. And I think that differentiates us a bit, because when you go to a lot of our competitors, it doesn't matter where the book lands, the book's going to look pretty much the same. If you had a book published by St. Martin's Press, it's going to look way different than if it was published by FSG. And believe it or not, they'll bid on the same book sometimes. You'll see that more often across some of our other imprints, but they bid against each other. And this is a little, inside baseball, but I think it's a fun illustration of how we differentiate it. It's if we have a book coming in and 2 or 3 of our publishers want it, they'll value it differently. And I don't want to tip. They'll come to me, usually when that happens, it's a higher level. So I got to approve it. And I don't want to tip the hand and let one side know what the other side's looking to pay. But if they're way off, if someone's looking to pay double what someone else is, I'll say, you're not going to get it for that much. And they'll say, I don't care. That's what we think it's worth. And I know that probably doesn't happen other places. They want, give me the money. I want to buy the book. So that the fact that everyone has that point of view, that perspective, I think does make us different. And we're small enough where we can, give that bespoke attention. And we have a couple imprints that are real small. So we have that whole gambit, and I think that differentiates us.
Yeah, and I would think the author community, right? If you're an author trying to bring your work out and get in that touch, and probably a very accessible CEO, I would think to customers.
Well, it's fun. I mean, I was a book publisher, and that's one of the things that gives me a lot of pressure. My friends,
street cred,
a little bit. It's one of these odd things because all my friends that are from not the publishing world, they think you're this creative guy, and everyone in publishing thinks I'm the business guy. So I get, and I'm both, right? And I was a publisher for the better part of 20 years, and the fact that all the publishers in the company rely on that and say, oh, they want to bounce ideas off me, I really appreciate it because I'm not a micromanager at all. I give everyone their head. I'll ask the pointed questions, but when they come to me and say, "Hey, I have this auction," it was on the flight down here, or on the way to the airport. Someone said, "We're close. We just need this one thing," and brainstormed how to get the deal done. And so at least I get to stay close a little bit to so some of the fun stuff, some of the stuff I did coming up. So that's been great. And when people think about Macmillan, I want them to say Macmillan. That's the place to be. And I wish I came up with that on my own, but I'll tell you a quick story. When years ago at BEA, I was walking the floor, and an agent that I knew but wasn't really like super friendly with, just knew her from the world. She's like, John, I'm so glad I see you. I got to tell you the story. She tells me a story about how an editor at one of our competitors came to her asking for, I need a new job, help me find a new job. The agent says, what do you want? And she says, I'm not sure, but I hear Macmillan's the place to be. And that was on the kid side. So that's the message I say to the entire company now. We have a town hall Wednesday. I'll reinforce it. Because if people hear Macmillan and they think Macmillan's the place to be, that means that our authors want to work with us, other authors want to work with us, agents want to bring us books, the retailers think we're good partners, all of you think we're good partners, and all our employees like working for us, and all our competitors' employees wish they could. And that's what we go for. And that's something that I think that permeates the organization and differentiates us a bit. And I am hands-on. We're owned by two people. We're a privately held, family-owned company with two shareholders. And that mentality impacts what we do. And I think it gives us an advantage as well. We know that creativity doesn't happen on a quarter-by-quarter basis. Yes, they care what the financials look like, but they're also patient to make sure that we can grow the business for the long term.
Yeah, I like that structure. Your boss, the chair of the board, works for a board that he appoints. That's a pretty good setup. I think we wish we all could have that, right?
I would take it.
Yeah. So go a little broader for a minute. So thank you. Macmillan obviously has done extremely well and has a long history. So and congratulations on your job running that and continuing that. But go a little bit broader to the industry. What's going to happen? Obviously this room, we're a little biased towards the physical book and the printed book, but audio, ebooks, it's all important. But the industry as a whole, the trade book world, what should we expect? What do you see in the next, we're not going to go out 5 years, but 2-3 years? What's going to happen in this industry?
Oh yeah. If I had the crystal ball, I would have used it a long time ago, right? No, I think it's a great time to be in books, period. It's, I've heard other folks say it. I completely agree. Some of the things we talked about, I might jump ahead to things you and I talked about that we talk about, but bookstores are growing. I think the ABA has added nearly 1,000 stores since 2019. The members, 1,000 member stores. So they're up to nearly, over 2,800 members, 300 new stores last year. They're selling physical books. Barnes & Noble is saying they want to add new stores. That's going to be primarily, that's physical books. It's brick and mortar. For us, we've nearly doubled the number of units we've printed over the last decade or so. When I look at the industry numbers, we might have had a peak in 21, pandemic related stuff, but we're still printing more books on the trade side than we have in years. Digital's growing, and we like that too. But the book as an object is a thing, and I think it's never been stronger as book as an object. And then when we'll talk more about printed edges and just the whole notion of collectability. I think it's a great time to be in book publishing. I think those trends are going to continue. I think the concept of collectability is growing. And, we talk a lot about social media marketing, but they all want to hold up a book when they're talking about when they're giving their spin on it. They're all holding up a book. They're not holding up their phone showing a picture of the book. They're holding up the book.
Yeah. It's real, right? There's something about that. Someone wants to tell their story. They want a printed product.
Yeah, and they're buying the book physically. They might buy the audio and the ebook too, but they want that object on their bookshelf.
Yeah, that's great. So this group makes those books, right? This is the organization that makes the materials, makes the equipment, and puts it all together and delivers that physical book. You mentioned The pandemic. So I'll put you on the spot a little bit. Pandemic happened, supply chains got mucked up across everywhere, and the need for manufacturing here in the U.S. shifted back significantly. All of us, none of us wanted the pandemic to happen, but many in this room, there weren't too many industries that benefited from the pandemic, but it was great. And as we spoke to our publishing customers during and shortly after the pandemic, there was lots of great talk about, yep, it's going to stay here. Manufacturing going to stay here. It's important to support industry. We get that it's a little bit more expensive, but this is what we should be doing. If we fast forward, the vast majority of our publishing customers, maybe not all the way back, but a tremendous amount of products has shifted back overseas. So can you talk about what's the balance and obviously being competitive? You can buy product cheaper in China and in other geographies, but how do you make that decision of whether a product gets produced internationally or onshore in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, part of it's capacity. I mean, I love the fact that we're doing more in the U.S. Like I said, I think we're printing more books in the U.S. than we ever had. There was some years ago, this is some dated information, but I thought about what if we pull all of our 4-color, all of our picture books, let's say our children's picture books, bring them back on to the U.S. There wasn't enough capacity to do it. So I think it's been exciting over the last several years to see the investment that all of you have been making in the business. I mean, I don't know. It's probably one of the biggest investments in years, right? I mean, decades probably, in terms of what everyone's putting into the business. So that's exciting. And I've spoken to several folks about this. I'd love to do more. I mean, the 4-color stuff is the biggest, right? That's the stuff that the price point is different. And I'd be willing to pay a little bit of a premium to get those books done here. It can't be so much that I can't afford to do it. So we'll find that balance. And we are doing more and more of the stuff that we normally would do in China. That's primarily when we print overseas. That's what we're printing. We're doing some in Europe too, for capacity purposes. But I'd love to bring more back into the U.S. I think it's for sustainability, it's better. I think it's better for political reasons. You don't know what's going to happen if some sort of political change happens. And I'm not even talking about this election. I'm just saying we've been talking about this for years now. China might say, "Hey, we don't want to ship the books." I don't know. There could be an issue with a million different things. We don't want to be beholden to that. So I think the opportunity to bring more is real, and we just got to make sure we get the pricing right. And I know it's going to cost a little bit more, but it can't cost so much more that we can't do it.
All right, let's go a little easier. You brought it up. Let's talk politics. No, okay. Just kidding. But you did mention, and I think it started more overseas, but edge printing and collectibles. That's a trend that I think we've seen it in Europe and the UK for a while, but clearly seems to be showing up here in the US in a big way. Is that what's driving that, and is that here to stay?
I think it's here to stay. The level and how the impact of it will play over time, but they're beautiful, right? And we're getting better at it. It used to be stained edges, then it was stenciled edges, and now we can put a picture of your face on the edge of the book if we want, Dave. I mean,
yeah, please.
I mean, it's really it's something else where the technology is going. So I think that it's something that once you have it, it's going to be hard to get rid of it. And as more people do it, maybe we can get that price down a little bit, right? I got to put the plug in for the publishing side of things. But the more affordable it is, the more we could do. People like it. I know that several folks last night told me they're buying more machines, so I think that's a good move. I think it's something that it's here to stay. I really think so. And why? It's cool. The book as an object is here. The whole concept of collectability. I was at a Holtzbrink CEO company. Now, Holtzbrink's our holding company. We have science businesses. We have trade businesses. We have digital businesses. We have learning businesses. And they're one of the guys. I told them we were doing this collectible line of publishing. We started it. We announced it at the beginning of the month, a whole collectible line. We're calling it Fabulistic. And he's like, "Oh, I got to get me one of those." And this guy's, he's a corporate guy. And he's a decent book guy, but he's just a collector. And he collects a bunch of stuff. So that notion of collectability, I think, has been permeating society for a long time now. And we're just hitting it in the book world. And then I think the concept of a cool looking book has always worked. It's just that people weren't seeing the lift. Now, years ago for Six of Crows, which is Lee Bardugo's 4th book, we did stained edges on that. I think you did them for us actually. And we, it was just a color, a solid color. We did red for one and black for the second one. I think, I can't remember. Maybe it was the other way around. And that was like 2017. And her sales were 5 times what they were for the book before. Now the book was great too. I mean, don't get me wrong. It wasn't just because we put some color on the edges, but we couldn't keep it going. It just, what this capacity to do it wasn't there. We couldn't reprint. We weren't set up for it because the world wasn't where it is today. I wish I had the foresight back then to say, you know what? No, let's figure out a way to make it work. Someone else did, and the folks in the UK did it. And I think that it looks good. And it's that notion of collectability, the notion of a book as an object is something that we've been underestimating, I think, for, at least a decade.
And a lot of it used to be cover art, right? And the jackets, and that's what sold the book. But now with the staining, you can do soft cover books. You can do, the hardcover books. It's a little everything.
Yeah, but you want the jacket to look good. You want the cover to look good. And if the edges can look good too, it's an entire package. And it's a marketing expense. That's the way I look at it. Every once in a while, a finance person will say to me, oh, that PPB is way high. I go, no, it's a marketing expense. That's a marketing expense on that book.
Yeah. Do you see a shift, hardcover to softcover, or any trends in that area that we should be thinking about?
I hope not. I don't see it. I think that there's still a value in hardcover. I think we're seeing some pressure in middle grade that to go to paperback or to do more paperbacks. I think the hardcover still has a value. I think people still perceive it. We are sometimes going quicker to paperback than we used to. Sometimes we're going longer though, because the digital side maybe upfront takes that initial price sensitivity away. So be like, okay, if I'm really price sensitive, I get the ebook. No, that doesn't help all you folks. But like I said, we're still seeing more print books in the world. And for us, like I said, it's more than double what it was, a decade ago. So that's a good number, double. So I think that hardcover is still going to be a thing. I think that paperbacks will have a different life. Some books might go original trade, but also we're seeing just more books.
Yeah.
We're seeing more books. So
that's great. So shift again a little bit out of that world of the manufactured book. One of the topics that comes up at these meetings regularly, and it's because we're getting pressure from our publishing customers, is sustainability. Sustainability is great. I think it's hard to find someone who doesn't believe we should have a closer eye on the environment and that everything we do, but seemingly folks don't want to pay more for sustainability. And obviously Von Holtzbrink, Macmillan, this is a topic I think you all were on the forefront of this whole idea. And how do you see that affecting the business as a whole?
I mean, for us as a company that's owned by an EU company, we have no choice but to address it. I mean, for the folks that don't know, the EU has promulgated regulations that require extensive sustainability reporting. It's more rigorous than our financial reporting. I mean, it's originally it was 40,000 pages of rules. I can't remember what they cut it down to. It's under 10. I think it's under 5. It's absurd. It's an incredible. I mean, and I'm saying absurd just because I love sustainability. We're so committed to it. It's one of our core values in the company. But to have a few thousand pages of sustainability reporting requirements sort of defeats the purpose of it. So it's huge. We have no choice. We have to do it. We want to do it. Macmillan has cut our carbon emissions by half over the last decade or so, while at the same time doubling the number of books we publish. A lot of that's coming from better sourcing of paper. And I think of our reductions, 70-ish% of it comes from how we look at paper. So this is core who we are. I mean, USA Today listed us as one of the most sustainable companies in the country this year. So we have to figure out ways to get better at it. That's part of the reason why I said bringing more stuff overseas. Ships use, they're dirty. A lot of the electricity overseas is coal still. So, it's hard to have this stuff without getting too political. But when you're talking about the environment, you need clean energy, you need good paper. You can't be putting books on boats. So those are all things we have to look at. And yeah, we have been paying more. We've cut our emissions and we're carbon neutral. Now, some of that's with offsets. So we pay for that. So that's part of the reason I originally said, why don't we bring some stuff, onshore it? Because if we're paying for offsets and I can do the books more sustainably here, net, the offsets are now a little questionable, right, about how effective they are. But we know if we make the books cleaner to begin with, that's better for the environment. So these are all things we're thinking about.
Yeah. And there's a lot of folks in this room have worked hard to promote that, books paper is a sustainable resource.
Yeah.
Guess what? You use paper and you replant trees and they grow, and if you do it in the right way, paper's not a bad word. The old "don't print it" was not a good marketing ploy, and I think we didn't get ahead of that early enough.
No, that's true. And when you say you kill trees for a living, it's not an exciting soundbite, right? But we are replanting, we're reforesting, and people are far more conscientious about how we're doing what we do. And I think that's why, and we need to keep doing it. I think it's the right thing to do. Our company, our ownership is very committed to it. And it's something I'm always trying to figure out what's the next thing we could do to make sure we're doing it the right way.
So we've talked a little bit about overseas production, sustainability, trends in the market. One other topic, and then we'll open it up for questions and see what else folks want to talk about. But there was a great article last week that I read. Great. I thought it was great, but I'm sure there might be others who don't think it's great. But it was in Publishers Weekly and in some blogs. The headline was, "Have you purchased a weirdly low-quality paperback book lately?" I don't know if you saw this piece, and the whole premise of the piece is that publishers are being forced to give their files to distributors, wholesalers, and if a book's out of stock, they need to quickly produce a book of one and get it to a consumer, which conceptually is great, just-in-time inventory. But there's a difference between a book produced only so it gets out in one day to a consumer versus a crafted product that most of these manufacturers push. We didn't talk about this, but just your thoughts about just-in-time and managing inventory. Not print on demand. A lot of us do print on demand, but there's a manufacturing community versus folks who are just looking to get a book out quick and the quality of the product dropping. Any comments on that?
Yeah, it depends how you describe just in time. Remember pre-pandemic, if we had a book running and we called you up and said, "Look, we really need this reprint in a week," we got it. That's just in time enough usually, you know what I mean? Especially when you have a big name author that's looking for a level of quality that they want in a book. So I think that to the extent that all of you keep investing in businesses and have staff that can turn around these books and sort of a little bit quicker than we have been during the worst times of the pandemic, that works for me. Will there be people out there that are continuing to go out and get whatever they can get in a day, and it's maybe not the highest quality? Sure. I don't think that's going to be us. I think there's going to be a mix. We're going to see. We're still going to have big runs on offset because we're going to have big initial orders, and there's no reason not to have big offset runs. They look good. And we can plan for it. We have, hopefully our backlist continues to grow. That's been one of the reasons that we've been having success over the last several years at Macmillan, and those books are somewhat predictable, so we can print those in advance. We've expanded our warehouse in the U.S. We're expanding our warehouse in the U.K. We have spaces to put them. So if I know I have a couple dozen, 100 titles that sell pretty regularly, I can go along with those and store them and maybe print them when you guys have a little bit more capacity in the slower times. So that's all smart approach to the business. Then there might be stuff where it makes sense to go digital, but high quality digital with you guys saying, okay, look, the market's changing. All of our accounts are buying a little bit tighter. I think that's better for the environment. I think it's better for our bottom lines generally. It does put the risk back on the publisher. So we've had a couple of books this fall already that were running real hard, and we needed to get quick reprints. And thankfully, a lot of folks here stepped up and got us some quick reprints. Down the road, maybe that would be a digital reprint. I don't know. Maybe we would, or maybe at a certain level, I'm sure you're seeing this with some of our competitors. It's something I'm just starting to think about. At what level of run per year should we just do digital? If it's 2,000 copies a year do I do that offset, or do I say that digital? But again, it's not going to be this. I don't think it's going to be print on demand for a book like that. I think we'll say, let's do a digital print run, and maybe we'll do a couple over the years. And we're still figuring that out. We're still learning, and hopefully we can talk more about it and figure out what works best for you too.
Great. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you, John. You obviously have a really interesting background. You're running a very successful publisher, and you're supporting the print world. So that's great. But it also means a lot. So let's close. Lastly, before we open it up for questions, all of us need time to relax and let down and to de-stress. And you have an interesting hobby, which I wouldn't think of as de-stressing the moment. But tell us a little bit about what you do when you're looking to relax.
It's my form of meditation, and it really is. And I'll tell you why. So I race cars as a hobby. I race vintage Formula cars. So it's they're open wheel cars. It's hard to believe a car from 1981 is considered vintage, but in this world it is. So it's actually at the newer end of the cars. So the cars are from 67 to 81, in my class. They look like mini Formula One cars, and in fact, when they were created to be entry level cars for Formula One drivers. So if there's any Formula One fans out there, like Ayrton Senna and Emerson Fittipaldi, they cut their teeth on the cars that I race. Now everyone does it at go-karts. So I do that. It's just about once a month, from like sort of March through the end of the year. And it's one of the most humbling things I've ever done. You're out there in the car and you're like, I just don't know how I can get this thing to go any better than it's going. And they're low power cars. The cars I had, they're old Ford Pinto engines for anyone that remembers Ford Pinto. So they're 1.6 liter engines. They're really slow. So it's a momentum. So if you make a mistake, you really suffer for it. You got to keep that momentum going up. And when I'm driving, I can't think about anything else but driving. And in fact, if you're doing it right, you're not thinking, it's just purely, reflex. So I'm not quite there yet. I've been doing it for a few years, and it's hard. 6 weekends a year. They're usually, 3-day weekend races. But when I'm in the car, I mean, my mind is clear, and it really, I come back invigorated because I'm not worried about, if I'm going to get that print run in time. I'm not worried about if that author is going to have an issue, and I come back invigorated. So this year was frustrating because my engine was on the fritz, so I missed most of the races, but had a good race in Watkins Glen in September, and I'm going down to Savannah in December. So thanks.
Great.
I'll talk about this for another hour if you'd like.
Well, I just wanted to end with that because I know we've talked about it here before. Look, mental health is something we all need to be aware of, and it's a huge issue in our society. And we need a de-stressor, all of whatever that is, to clean your mind and come back and be good. So that's great that you found that. And
Thanks.
Stay safe. Pickleball might be safer, but maybe not.
I don't know. All these guys with pickleball, they're hurting their back, they're pulling an Achilles or something. I think the car is very safe. And I've had some bad crashes too, and I was just getting started, and I'm okay,
That's great.
I'd rather hit the wall at 100 miles an hour than pull my back. That's just money on the car.
So why don't we open it up to questions?
Yeah, I pulled my Hemi playing soccer, so that's a different story.
John, thank you for joining us. So, kind of a simple question.
Who are you? Just want you to introduce yourself to John so we know.
John, I'm Joe Upton. I'm with Gash Printing, the only digital book printer you need to work with.
I think someone else told me that last night, and it wasn't you.
That was Doug Gash. So, no, just a simple question, kind of outside of crashing into a wall. What keeps you up at night? What are you, when you're working for a family-owned business? So you talked about long-term vision. So obviously it's not necessarily the next quarter, but you're looking out 2029, 30, et cetera. What are the concerns you have as a book publisher?
I'm going to give the honest answer, and no one here is going to like it. Getting the books on time is what kept me up. And I'll tell you, over the last 12 to 18 months, I sleep pretty good. So, but during the pandemic, during the 21, even into 22, it was just scary. And I know, and this is not a diss. I mean, I know the challenges you all were dealing with. It was an incredible time. I learned more about printing during that time. I'm like, well, one person doesn't show up, run the press. No, John, it doesn't work that way. That whole line's down for the night if someone doesn't show up, right? So it's that was really what kept me up at night. And then the thing that was keeping me up at night that I've somehow, and I don't know, you guys don't know me that well. I'm not Mr. Mellow. I'm not uptight, but I'm pretty intense. And so for me to just relax is a thing. And the employee sort of every day there could have been another employee kind of crises that some were real, some were less real, and having to deal with that when I first came into the role was something that I didn't know how to manage because it was like, I want to fix things. I want to make them better. And some of these things just have to play out, and it's about conversation. So nowadays, I don't lose sleep over that because I've learned to let it just roll off my back, and we figure out a way to, we've built trust within the organization. Trust is another one of our values. It goes a long way. I mean, we're all going to make mistakes, right? None of us are perfect. And the key, I think, for leadership is having your team give you the benefit of the doubt. And that's something that we lost at Macmillan for a brief period of time. And I think we've been able to get it back over the last couple of years. So that's why I sleep better on that issue too, is because when you don't get the benefit of the doubt, come on, we're always going to do a quick mixed speak. We're always going to maybe make a decision that folks aren't in love with. But when people believe that you're authentic, that you're doing the right thing, it goes a long way.
Something I never expected to see. It wasn't that long ago that there was a employee strike at HarperCollins with lower level people, but lots of talk about, I'm not sure if this stresses you, but employees in the office. A lot of us deal with this at times. How do you handle these days post the pandemic? Are you back to the office full time, or do you give people a choice to?
We give people a choice. And I think publishing is all over the board. And some people are saying 2-3 days. Other people like us, I think PRH, no requirement. And this was my decision, and it wasn't something that my boss really. We had a lot of back and forth on it. I believe that over time, remote work will be the norm. I don't think we're going to be sitting here 10 years from now, and it's different when you're in manufacturing. We have a warehouse, right? Those folks, we can't do that remote, right? Those folks are still, picking and packing books. So, but I believe by and large, office jobs will not be 5 days a week for a variety of reasons. So I just said, let's get going with it. Let's figure out how to do it. And we're far from perfect. There's things we have to get better at, onboarding. We're still an apprenticeship business in trade publishing. So that mentorship, these are all things we need to be better at. We try to create moments for folks to come in and say, okay, we're not telling you to come in for the sake of coming in, but there's an event. We serve lunch every Tuesday and Thursday, bribe them with food. But the reason we do that is not really just because I want people to come in the office, is that we have 5 floors. We sublet a floor and a half. We're down to 3.5 floors. They're still big floors. And we're probably, on any day, call it 25 to 35% capacity. If we know that there's going to be a lunch, everyone from all those different parts of the floors gets to bump into each other. Why do you want people to come together? It's that serendipity a lot, right? The water cooler chat. So we're trying to figure out ways to maximize what we call the hybrid environment. People working from home, people working else. I go in 5 days a week, and not because I want to set an example. I actually feel invigorated by it. I live in the city. It's easy. Our office is downtown Manhattan. Door to door is 20 minutes for me, so it's easy for me to do it. But when I stay at home, I find that I turn that computer on at 7 a.m. I turn it off at 11 o'clock at night. Maybe I forget to brush my teeth. I might not eat, and it's ridiculous, right? So when I wake up and I get dressed and I go to the office, I have that transitional moment where I'm going to the office. I have that transitional moment coming home. That gives me a better rhythm in my day. So when we hear people talking about burnout, and I'm sitting here scratching my head, I'm like, you don't have to come in. We're giving you a lot of flexibility. We've added mental health days. We do 5 additional days off in Macmillan for just wellness days. We usually try to put them around a holiday, like we do over Labor Day weekend. We add an extra day. Over July 4th, we add an extra day. We add days like in March and April where there are no holidays. We'll add a day in there. So everyone has, usually every month of the year, we have a day off now, except for August.
It's working then anyway.
Yeah, right. I think a lot of people do take holidays. That's why we did it. So we're doing a lot of those things. So why are people still saying they're burned out? And I think because they don't have that self-discipline to turn the computer off. I like that they're working hard, but you have to leave time for yourself too. So these are things we're trying to manage. And I do believe in office environments where we're not going to see 5 days a week in mass ever again.
Great.
I could be wrong, but that's what I think.
Dave, sorry.
Good morning, David Hetherington, Books International. You were very encouraging, very optimistic about the trade business, but Macmillan also has a higher education business. Could you share some thoughts about what you think the future is for the higher ed publishing?
The beauty is I don't oversee that business, so I can just make it up and tell Susan to have to deal with it. But it's a different structure than we had in the past. So Sargent oversaw all the stuff. I just oversee trade in the U.S. and the warehouse in the UK. I do think from my conversations with my colleagues over on the learning side, I think the print book is going to be declining there. I've spoken to some of you though, and on the higher ed side, probably less print, but on K through 12, I think there's an uptick, right? I think the workbooks, the supplements, and I think that's good because those are consumables. So that'll be good for you guys because every year you got to print more because someone else already drew in it. So I think that in higher ed, I really think it's going to become a digital business. I just do. I mean, it already is. But I think there's opportunity on that primary and secondary education that could work for print. And what are you seeing? I mean, I'd be interested to hear what all of you are seeing in that area because it's similar equipment, right? It's the same machines. I want you guys to have, you need capacity utilization. So it'd be interesting to hear what folks in the room think about that.
I have a question, not
Sure. You could tell me later in private. Yeah.
how is AI affecting your business, and what do you see the changes that it's going to affect the industry?
I think it's early days with AI. I think that I'm not 100% sure what the changes will be. I'm not even probably 10% sure what the changes will be. I think that one thing in trade publishing has been, there hasn't really been a first mover advantage with this new kind of stuff. So I think that we could be fast followers and see what happens. At the same time, we're not sitting on our hands. We're learning a lot. We're trying to experiment and see what AI can do. And we say AI, and it's two letters, but it's incredibly multifaceted. We've been using machine learning for decades. I mean, we look at pricing on the market. We use machine learning to judge how does our pricing compare to our competitors. We've been using machine learning to estimate to look for comps for new acquisitions, new book acquisitions. That is AI, but everyone's talking about is generative AI, right? So I think that I've seen some tools. We were out in Silicon Valley with a group of folks from Holtzbrink over the summer, and I don't know if there's any Star Trek fans in the room, but the Universal Translator exists today. I literally watched. So what the Universal Translator is you sit and talk, and it translates to whatever language you need it to translate to. I watched this happen where two people were having a conversation, and with a very small lag, we're talking seconds, it translated the language to English to another language. And it was incredible over a video conference. Then you could even make it sound like the person speaking. So it would sound like if I was speaking French, and I do not speak French, it would sound like me. So the technology is improving all the time. I think we're looking at it for ways to improve our demand planning. We're forecasting. We're looking at ways to manage how we store inventory in the warehouse. I think that for nonfiction authors, AI could be an incredible tool. I saw another tool that it's billed as the greatest research assistant. You take all your research and you dump it into this model. It doesn't look at anything else but your research. And you could query your own research and it gives you back, tell me the top 10 conclusions about this subject line. And it'll give it to you and it'll source your reference material. So that's what you would have done. It's sort of like we used to plow the field with a horse, or an ox, and now we use tractors. I think AI has the ability to do that. Now, if AI starts writing books, that's where people get a little nervous, and will that happen? Sure. I think we've been taking a human first approach to AI. I fully believe that folks should license material. I think that the tech companies went ahead and stole a bunch of content from all the authors and from publishers, and I think that's wrong. So I think that's something we have to address, and it seems like there's motion. At least there's a lot of talk now about licensing, and I do think that's the right thing. So I think AI is more of an opportunity than something to fear. I think that but we got to make sure we do it right. I think a lot of people are concerned about people losing their jobs, and that makes a lot of sense. I don't see that happening anytime soon in publishing. I'm not sure it's going to happen at all, because if AI is what I think it's going to be another tool that enables us to get freed up from the mundane or the repetitive and focus on the creative and the sophisticated. So that's what I see happening over time. And it's not all that different than, some years ago when self-publishing became a thing. What is that going to mean for books? It's different, right? Because it's a technology, but a lot of the self-published authors are now coming to us to publish them. When you look at Romantasy, a lot of those authors started out as self-published authors. So, and now it's created an opportunity for us. I think there's a lot of things with AI that we can't do. We don't have scale. The upfront costs are too much. We can expand markets without impacting jobs with it. So I think there's a balancing act, and we have to make sure that we do it right and take the human component into account.
Hi, I'm Ashley Gordon from HP.
Hi.
And you said earlier that you're sleeping again after concerns about delivery dates and capacity, which is great. My question is, since the pandemic and since the challenges of the supply chain, why do you think you're sleeping again? What's working? And what makes a good relationship between a publisher and a printer? And is there any opportunity, particularly around new technology and the continuing challenges of the supply chain, where we could work more deeply together?
Wow, that's a lot. I think I'm sleeping better because the books are getting here when they say they're going to get here. And that's huge. And, that's the most important thing. If you tell me it's going to take 6 weeks, I might not like it, but I can plan for that. And we did that. So the uncertainty around the supply chain has, I think, mostly gone away. It's not perfect. But it's pretty much gone. So that's why I sleep better at night. And I think the relationship with a printer and a publisher is like almost any relationship. It's open dialogue. It's being honest with each other about what our needs are, and then figuring out creative ways to work around it. So one of the things that we did when the capacity was tight, we started just building longer lead times in. And it wasn't great for our warehouse, but it was a trade-off, right? Everything's a trade-off. Let me get those books in a month before I really need them. So if you guys have an issue, if something slips, we have a little cushion. And yeah, it might cost a little bit more, but it's okay. And now, like last week, when I got a 10-day turnaround on a book that I needed because the book was running, that was huge. So that kind of give and take, that kind of open dialogue, figuring out ways that we can experiment together. And one of the things that a lot of our partners say to us, which I love, is that Macmillan's always willing to experiment. When we do experiment, we do it in a controlled way. We have test groups. So we're not just putting finger in the air and saying, oh yeah, I think it worked. No, we look at the data, and we're getting a little bit better at being more analytical in how we approach things. But when we try something new, we love to try something new, and then we measure it. So that's those are some of the things. And what was the last question? Was something else? I forgot what the last one was.
Going forward, with new technology, we just talked about AI, the changes in the industry, color printing, going digital. What are some of the opportunities really where, the 2 years down the road, if we work together on this, where can we really grow?
I think the sky's the limit for where we can grow. And I'm not trying to, and I'm not Mr. Optimist all the time. I'm pretty much of a realist, but I've seen stuff happen over the last several years in printing that, I never would have thought what we could do with edges would have happened. It just wasn't even in my realm. Now, I don't know how complicated that was. It just wasn't there. So I don't know enough to be articulate about what tomorrow can look like, but it just seems like we have the ability, and also I think the consumer is more open to things that are a little bit different. If you delivered a high quality digital copy years ago, people would still say, I don't know. Now they can't tell the difference. And part of that is because the quality's up. Part of that is because I think people's expectations are a little bit different. So once we get over some of the maybe more emotional things, it could open the door to a bunch. I do think that when we look at our backlist, how much of that can maybe go to digital, frees up some time for other stuff on the offset. Those are things that we could do more of, and I'm sure our competitors are a little bit ahead of us on that, but it's something that we're looking at.
Hey, John.
Hey.
To piggyback off of Ashley's question, you overbought a bit during the supply chain, like you said, month of inventory ahead of time. How much is that ferreted through now? Are you back to a more regular buying pattern? Because I know there was a bit of a slowdown beginning of the year because of the excess inventory you guys were trying to sell out in the market. Kind of curious where that stands today.
Yeah, I don't think we have any excess inventory at this point. There may be specific titles where we have it. And in reality, I think Macmillan was probably impacted less than someone else. Our backlist has been growing. Our backlist is much bigger than it was even 5 years ago. I think it hurt the folks that had backlist the most, because particularly some of the accounts were like, you can't take a perennial seller and be out of stock on it. So they went really long on both the accounts and then the publisher. We had that, but a little bit less of it. So I think our inventory levels are normalized. Our inventory levels at accounts are absolutely normalized. Again, there's always going to be the one title, but it's not systemic. It's about, our expectations were high on that new frontlist title and it didn't work. Thankfully, this year that's happening less and less. We're having a great year, and the books seem to be working. So no, I don't think there's too much inventory in the system, and I'm not hearing that from anyone in general. anymore. So what we probably still are doing is buying a little bit more than we would need because the accounts take less upfront. And if a book works, we don't want to be caught out. So there's probably a small percentage on any book that we have faith in that we're probably a little bit more than I wish we had. And that does add up over time. It's way less than it was. And that's why I'm saying if we get back down to a quick, a 7-day turnaround time or something, if we really need it, or a 2-week turnaround. Remember, 7-day was, even back in the day, was ludicrous. But that was like, me begging on my hands and knees, I need the book. You can give it to me in a week. If we could if I knew I can get a 2-week turnaround time on a book, I'd probably go a little bit less on some of the orders that we're doing.
So to finish up here on that sort of vein, to help thin your warehouse, sell us. It's October, about to be November, fourth quarter. Holidays are upon us. What should we all be picking up? What's the best Christmas present in your lineup or holiday gift that we should all be picking up?
This is always the worst question to ask a publisher, because then Jim's going to write up about it, and then some author's going to get pissed at me for not mentioning their book. I'll have an easy one. Tomorrow, Louise Penny's The Gray Wolf comes out, so it's a release tomorrow, and I think is one of her best books ever. It's super exciting. It's very pacey, and if you're a fan of this one has more of a thriller aspect. It's Gamache. It's I think it's in the 22nd book in the series. I can't remember. Don't quote me on that. But it's a long running series, but it has a little bit more of a thriller aspect to it, and it's a lot of fun. So that comes out tomorrow. And Louise is great. I'm going to see her tomorrow for lunch.
Great. How are we doing, Matt? Any other questions out there? All right. Well, time.
Oh wait, Jim.
Jim Milligan from Publishers Weekly.
Wait.
Sure. There's been a lot of talk among some of the other bigger publishers about trying to adapt to the post-pandemic level, and that the market has changed. And they seem to be changing the way they're marketing books and trying to advertise books. Is there some sort of fundamental shift that you see how you approach the market and approach consumers today as you did 2019?
I don't think so. I think that, I said it earlier, the best way to sell a book is word of mouth. I do think that word of mouth looks different today than it did even 5 years ago. So yeah, we're spending more time on TikTok. We're spending more time on different social channels. But go back a decade. Those were book bloggers. And then they became bookstagrammers. It's the same kind of dynamic. And then 20 years ago, those were reviewers that we would go after. So I think it's different. Things can happen more quickly. It could definitely be more viral. Things happen on their own much more quickly. And the impact when it does happen, is huge. A great review might have, had people go to the store. It wasn't immediate and it was at a different level. So the impact is maybe bigger, but I think the fundamental dynamic of it is very similar. And, we're getting better at trying to, you have to be real. You have to be authentic. You can't advertise on TikTok and expect that to get something to go viral. You have to, find the evangelists and empower them to spread the gospel. We're getting better at that. And you want to just, get that flywheel spinning, give them that little, whatever it is, that little, germ of a thing that makes them want to take off. And that's what we're trying to get better at doing.
Great. Well, time is a currency. And very much appreciate you taking some time to join us in your evangelism of the printed book.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And I really, it was great spending time with folks last night, and hopefully see some more folks today at lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you.